addressing this assembly, giving your analysis and your proposals, and answering our questions. I wish you well with your great country in the heart of Europe. And we want to thank you for Switzerland, you and Switzerland, for being so strong amongst our family. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, before we start our next debate, I want to give you this information from the Equality Committee. In solidarity with women and girls in Iran who are protesting at this very moment to have their fundamental rights respected, the Equality Committee is organizing a group photo tomorrow in the lobby of the chamber just outside here at 9:50, 9:55. You are all invited to show then and there your solidarity. 9:50 in front of the chamber. Let us show that our solidarity is with these brave women and girls in Iran who are standing up for the respect for their fundamental rights. We now interrupt for a moment to change the chair, and then we continue with the current affairs debate, which will be introduced by Mr. Paul Gavin. You are taking over.
Yes.
Ah, you look beautiful.
Thank you.
I have to say it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. It's good.
Yes, it's okay. Hello, dear. You are big now. Looks. Did you like it? Where do you continue? And then we continue, and the next item of business this afternoon is a current affairs debate on military hostilities between Azerbaijan and Armenia, including strikes against settlements and civilian infrastructures. The debate will last 1 hour, and speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for all members, except the first speaker, chosen by the Bureau, who is allowed 7 minutes. And the debate, we will try to close at 5 p.m., so it's a little less than 1 hour. And in the debate, I call first Mr. Paul Gavin, and you have 7 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chairperson. On the 12th of September 2022, a series of clashes erupted between Azerbaijani and Armenian troops on Armenian territory. The violence resulted in nearly 300 deaths and dozens of injuries on both sides over a 3-day period. At least 204 Armenian servicemen were killed or missing, while Azerbaijan acknowledged 80 fatalities amongst its forces, bringing the total number killed to at least 284. A ceasefire brokered by Russia on September 13th broke down within minutes, but thankfully a new ceasefire was successfully concluded between the two countries the following day, September 14th, with considerable international assistance. I think it is significant that all of the violence took place on Armenian territory. None of the violence took place in the vicinity of the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Furthermore, the violence included strikes against settlements and civilian infrastructure. These have been well documented. They include attacks on the spa town of Jermuk, where numerous residential and tourist locations were hit by shells and other military weapons, including the ropeway, 3 hotels, a sanatorium, and a cafe. In Sokt, 200 houses and a municipality building were damaged. In total, according to Armenia Security Council, 36 towns and villages were targeted, including Goris, Sisian, Kapan, Vardenis, Teg, and Gehamatar. The Armenian government tell us that 4 civilians were killed, 1 more is missing, and 7 wounded. It's significant that Azerbaijan does not deny launching these attacks, but rather has accused Armenia of using civilian and residential structures as firing points, and argued that therefore they were legitimate targets. I do not believe this to be an acceptable response. I also note that Azerbaijan have referenced and blamed large-scale provocations, quote unquote, from the Armenian side. But surely, in this year, above all years, we must all be clear that it is never acceptable for one country to invade the sovereign territory of another. It's also important to note that Azerbaijan continues to occupy parts of Armenian territory as a result of this incursion, and again, this is unacceptable. There have been disturbing reports of possible war crimes being committed by the Azerbaijani armed forces, horrific video evidence of 7 Armenian soldiers being executed, and also desecration of female bodies. I've seen these videos, and they are truly horrendous in their content, and indeed they may constitute evidence of war crimes. I further note that Czech News, the respected fact-checking site, has examined the video and found nothing to indicate that it is a fake. They've also established it was first shared on Azerbaijani Telegram channels, and did significant work to geolocate the site of the video as being in the mountains of Lake Sev, and also confirmed it was very likely made in the time period that would correspond to the outbreak of this conflict. It is also important to note that the Azerbaijan government has said that if the video proves to be genuine, they will seek prosecutions for these actions. I also note correspondence from Azerbaijan stating that they've uncovered evidence of potential war crimes that were committed in the earlier conflict in the 1990s, when parts of Azerbaijani sovereign territory were occupied by Armenia. They referenced the discovery of mass burial sites and evidence of torture and executions. We must never forget that there are still 4,000 Azeris and 1,000 Armenians missing from that earlier conflict. Having witnessed firsthand last year the evidence of the aftermath of occupation by Armenian forces, specifically the destruction of Agdam, rightly described as the Hiroshima of the West, there is no doubt in my mind that these charges too require thorough investigation. Indeed, I think it only fair to reflect that the Council of Europe did not pay enough attention to the whole issue of occupation by Armenian forces of up to a fifth of Azeri territory for the best part of 3 decades. But again, I have to be clear, these charges, these potential war crimes from this earlier period in no way justify this most recent incursion by Azerbaijan. What makes these events particularly regrettable is that they took place just 2 weeks after a 4th round of EU-mediated high-level talks in Brussels between the two leaders, Azerbaijani President Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan, where progress was being made. I understand that difficult issues around transportation routes, a possible interstate treaty, and the rights and security of Karabakh Armenians had all been advanced to some degree. Last year, I was rapporteur with regard to the humanitarian consequences of the 44-day conflict that broke out in 2020. I highlighted key issues around the disappeared, deaths from mines, Armenian prisoners of war, and hate speech, all of which remain largely unresolved. Indeed, I note that there are 259 either deaths or serious injuries from mines over the last couple of years. None of these issues will be resolved by war. And I would note the observation of Thomas de Waal that the biggest stumbling block with regard to resolving all these broader issues is the total lack of consequences for whichever side says no to compromise and agreement. I believe that all members of this Parliamentary Assembly must be clear that the use of military force is totally unacceptable in settling disputes between Council of Europe member states. My report called on the Committee of Ministers to pay particular attention to the needs of displaced persons and focus on confidence-building measures for all affected communities and measures necessary to build tolerant societies and tackle hate speech. Regrettably, we seem still very far away from such a scenario. The pressing need now is for both sides to re-engage in peace talks without further delay. We need to see much greater effort from the international community to ensure that this happens. Above all, we cannot have this issue being subject to global political games between superpowers vying for influence and control. I also believe Turkey, which played a significant role in supporting Azerbaijan during the last outbreak of violence in 2020, should adopt a more balanced approach to the wider issues of establishing a just and lasting settlement between these two countries. In this regard, it is welcome news that both Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to a civilian EU mission alongside their border. I understand the mission will start by the end of this month and aims to delineate the border between the two countries. The proposed timeline of 2 months seems rather short to me, but the real significance of this decision is that it arose from a meeting involving both Prime Ministers, as well as European President Charles Michel and President Macron. So in conclusion, I hope this mission will act to build confidence and dialogue between both countries. We cannot see any further slide back towards conflict. It resolves nothing. All it does is further delay justice for all of those families that have disappeared and victims of the war on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gavin. And then we continue with speakers on behalf of political groups. And the first speaker is Mrs. Boriana Åberg, representing the EPP group from Sweden. The floor is yours.
Madam President, dear colleagues, a few days ago I received a video showing a horrible execution of a woman, an Armenian prisoner of war. I'm still haunted by these atrocious scenes and the inhumane cruelty taking place. And it's not the only video where such a dreadful evil occurs. Since the large-scale military aggression against the territorial integrity of Armenia launched by the armed forces of Azerbaijan, numerous videos have been publicized by Azerbaijani users on social media. These videos demonstrate war crimes, horrible scenes of killing of Armenian prisoners of war, torture of Armenian servicemen, including women, and desecration of human corpses. The reaction from the international community was unequivocal. European Union, US, France, Germany, and several other countries expressed clear demand for full and impartial investigation of these brutal excessions. Our position is clear. Those responsible for war crimes must be held to account. And we noted that the military prosecutor's office in Azerbaijan has initiated a comprehensive investigation. Madam President, dear colleagues, today's debate is very timely and needed because the situation in the South Caucasus remains very tense and alarming. We have a situation where one member state of this organization attacks another member state. Any ignorance from us will enable new violence, new atrocities. On September 13, we witnessed aggression against Armenia, which resulted in the ongoing occupation of the sovereign territories of Armenia, horrendous sufferings, human losses on both sides, and a large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure in Armenia. The use of force or threat of force is becoming new normalcy, which is absolutely unacceptable. As Joseph Borrell said recently, responding to MEP's questions, the fact of the matter is that Azerbaijan has bombarded an occupied part of Armenia's territory, adding that Azerbaijani forces must be withdrawn from those border areas. We urge Azerbaijan to withdraw its armed forces from the sovereign territory of Armenia and to return to positions held prior to this escalation. We call on Azerbaijan to cease any actions that could further aggravate the already terrible situation on the ground. If you allow me to quote Antony Blinken, who said, "There cannot be military solution to the conflict. The diplomacy is the only way forward."
Thank you, Mrs. Åberg. The next speaker is Mr. Alexei Goncharenko from Ukraine, representing the European Conservatives. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And first of all, I want to wish to Azeri and Armenian people peace. We Ukrainians, we understand how important it is, like better than many others. So peace, that is the best what we want to support with these words our friends from Azerbaijan, from Armenia, and we believe that they can find solution. We see now progress in the negotiations between these two countries with the help of Europe. So I encourage them to continue. I am sure that they will find the solution, which should definitely respect territorial integrity and sovereignty of both of these countries. But I want to thank my group, European Conservatives and Democratic Alliance Group, for possibility to speak now, because today is the very important day when Ukrainian voice should be heard here. Why? Because at the moment we are here discussing rule of law, human rights, democracy, this morning our capital is in fire. Kiev is in fire, and not only, other Ukrainian cities too. There was the most terrible missile attack on Ukraine from February 24. More than 10 people killed, dozens are injured. Putin said that he used highly precise weaponry. And then we see how playground was destroyed, Kiev University, like young lady was making video for her friend, and at this exactly moment her apartment was hit by Russian missile. Yes, that was highly precise weaponry from Putin, and he wants to kill civilians, as many as possible. That's why he did it on Monday morning to do it. So I want to address all of you. How many more Ukrainians should die? How many more our children and women should die before the West and the free world will give us all weaponry we need to protect our sky, to give us tanks, fighters, everything we need to save our children? Today, my 2 children are in Odessa and my heart is bleeding, like millions of Ukrainian hearts. So please, help us today. Don't wait for anything. Every country can take one Ukrainian city and protect sky over any Ukrainian city. We will remember it for decades. Give us weaponry we need. One Leopard today means more than 1 million words. That is the situation for the moment. If there is a question of money, we will find money. We will take everything from us. We will take any possible loans. We will find it and we will buy it. But just give us this possibility. I am sure that ordinary people, not only from Ukraine, from all of our countries, will help us to do this. But these political decisions should be made today to finish this awful war. And once again, there is one country on this continent which wants the war. It's Russian Federation. And what's happening in South Caucasus, it's also because of them. So I want to ask all of us to stop this tyrant as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goncharenko. And the next speaker is Monsieur Jacques Lenay, ALDE Group. The floor is yours.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam President, colleagues. Following on from the conflict, which took 6,500 lives on both sides in 2020, fighting has again broken out between Armenia and Azerbaijan, even though they are both members of our organization. Apparently, Azerbaijan opened fire and its troops moved into Armenian territory. Armenia contends that it was only responding to Armenian provocations, and the clashes have led to the deaths of at least 286 people. For my part and on behalf of my group, obviously I condemn this recourse to force, which is wholly unacceptable as a way of settling disputes between members of this organization. These clashes, which occurred a month ago, are the most violent since the end of the war in 2020 and do not appear to be isolated incidents. In the light of this situation, which might rapidly escalate into a full-blown war, we need to recall a certain number of fundamental principles. First of all, that Armenia's territorial integrity must be respected and Azerbaijan must withdraw from Armenian territory in accordance with the ceasefire of the 10th of November 2020. What is more, a number of member states of the Council of Europe say that the 2 belligerents must respect the rights of prisoners of war and no longer organize abductions. Now, there are videos circulating on social media showing Armenians who have been kidnapped and tortured by Azeri soldiers. Azerbaijan must conduct investigations and bring the perpetrators to justice. I call on both states to rapidly negotiate a peace agreement which must be respected, and for that to be possible, the Council of Europe should fully play its role as a pan-European platform for discussion and contribute to political dialogue and lowering tensions. Ladies and gentlemen, the international community cannot remain indifferent to the situation in the region. The European Union, the United States, but also Russia and Turkey must work together to resolve this conflict. But it won't be possible to rally the international community in light of the war in Ukraine. There are repercussions of the war in Ukraine on Armenia and Azerbaijan. Russia is more isolated than ever before and is not going to facilitate discussions, particularly since Russia has an interest in becoming involved in the conflict. It is bogged down itself in Ukraine. And that is why we have to raise awareness amongst our governments of the need to act in the interest of peace in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Luna. We continue with Laura Castel, Mrs. Laura Castel from Spain and United Left. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the United European Left, I want to express grave concern regarding the most recent outbreak of violence between Azerbaijan and Armenia last month. I want to make the following points in regard to what has happened. Firstly, it is important to acknowledge that the evidence points to this most recent violence as arising from an Azerbaijani incursion into the sovereign territory of Armenia. Up to 300 soldiers died between 12th and 14th September. Secondly, to recognize that all of the violence took place on Armenian territory. None of the violence took place in the vicinity of the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. I do note that Azerbaijan have referenced and blamed provocations from the Armenian side, but it is not possible to verify these claims. Thirdly, it is important to note that Azerbaijan continued to occupy parts of Armenian territory as a result of this incursion. Again, this is unacceptable. Fourth, there have been disturbing reports of possible war crimes being committed by the Azerbaijani armed forces. Horrific video evidence of Armenian soldiers being executed and also desecration of bodies are in circulation. I also note recent correspondence from Azerbaijan alleging evidence that they have uncovered of potential war crimes that were committed in the early conflict in the 90s, when parts of Azerbaijani sovereign territory were occupied by Armenia. Having witnessed firsthand the evidence of the destruction by Armenian forces of Dam, there is not doubt that these too require thorough investigation, but in no way justify this most recent incursion by Azerbaijan. What makes these events particularly regrettable is that they took place just 2 weeks after a fourth round of European Union-mediated high-level talks in Brussels between the two leaders, Azerbaijani President Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan, where progress was being made. I understand that there are difficult issues around transportation routes and interstate treaty and the rights and security of Karabakh Armenians. This parliamentary assembly must send a clear message that the use of military forces is totally unacceptable in settling disputes between Council of Europe member states. We therefore call on Azerbaijan and Armenia to pull back from any further steps which might worsen the situation, to respect international agreements, and to engage in peace talks without further delay. And I conclude. We urge both member states to abide by their commitments taken upon accession, notably to settle the conflict by peaceful means. The Council of Europe is ready to support them in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Castel. And then we continue with Stefan Schenak from Austria on behalf of the Socialist Group. The floor is yours, Mr. Schenak.
Danke sehr, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The President of the Assembly, when opening the session, said that the delegations from Armenia and Azerbaijan ought to use the opportunity they have this week to have a positive exchange, and I would like to resoundingly support President Cox's appeal to both sides. Now, we have seen at lightning speed people losing their lives because of an interstate conflict, and not in Nagorno-Karabakh, but rather an incursion by Azeri troops into Armenian territory, and both sides are using heavy weapons. Now, there's all kind of information doing the rounds, and I would warn you to be on your guards because a lot of that information is propaganda. The important thing now is that we restore a ceasefire. The situation was partly triggered by the Ukraine crisis and is going to play out in the shadow of the Ukraine crisis. And we have to now push for a ceasefire. Russia, of course, doesn't have the clout to do that now. Russia, of course, brokered the last ceasefire, and it's the EU, Council of Europe and other international organizations such as the OSCE who are going to have to step into that role now. We must call on Turkey to use its potential to intervene in order to achieve a ceasefire. And as the rapporteur, Paul Gavin, quite rightly said, we have seen many deaths from landmines, and the Armenian side must grant access to buried landmines. At the same time, we must make clear to Azerbaijan that it must continue to allow exchanges of prisoners of war, because there are still prisoners in Azerbaijan and they must be allowed home. Now, any ceasefire, the one before, was not bad. And by the way, I was a rapporteur for Azerbaijan for 7 years, and every time we had official talks there, within a space of a few seconds, we always came on to the trauma of Nagorno-Karabakh. So, of course, a cessation of hostilities is important. But what is more important is that you live alongside a people. You cannot live as enemies. It's important that hate be banished from university and school curricula, because that is the only way there can be a shared future between neighbors.
You're on the speakers list. The next speaker is Madame Isabella Santiago from France and the Socialist Group. The floor is yours.
Madam President, dear colleagues, among the objectives of our Assembly are, of course, respect for human rights, democracy and the rule of law. But our deliberations must also contribute to peace. That is why I'm especially moved by the fact that my first statement today in this chamber as a new parliamentarian in the Parliamentary Assembly concerns this conflict, which we hoped was over and which sadly, after the 45-day war, which never stopped and has now resumed with very serious incursions on Armenian territory. And I very much hope our Assembly may vigorously denounce the resumption of hostilities by Azerbaijan against Armenia, with strikes on civilian infrastructure and facilities that belong to Armenia. As our colleagues have rightly said, and I express the wish that collectively we may express our wholehearted solidarity with the Armenian population and its representative institutions. This country is a democracy in the South Caucasus, which is in the throes of major difficulty. And the belligerents must be reminded of their commitments. The ceasefire must be respected. We must also open up dialogue for peace and a provisional settlement of hostilities in 2020, only endorsed fait accompli in the use of force, and the question of borders must come back on the negotiating table. We can no longer just look at the videos that are reaching us, which are unspeakable, with prisoners dying and missing. We have no news of them, prisoners who never come home, and very clear evidence of torture. So I think we need to convey this message of peace, and it is essential for the Armenian people to be able to live in peace on their land, within their borders. And I think here we, as others have said, must restore dialogue among all countries that may facilitate such a peace. I also think it's necessary for us to have a mission in situ to look at the situation and bring about this peace, which we all wish to see, so that we may resolve this conflict and find solutions for the Armenian people, which for years has been experiencing this territorial problem. And they have been stricken by war for too long, and their children must be able to live in peace.
Mrs. Santiago, then from EPP, Mr. Ruben Rubian from Armenia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank all of the speakers who spoke before me, especially Mr. Gowan, for telling the truth and establishing the facts. Indeed, my country, my democratic country, was recently attacked by its authoritarian neighbor. The attack was completely unprovoked, unjustified. Many civilians were killed, settlements were damaged, civilian infrastructure was damaged. Mr. Gowan presented it all. But why did this happen, dear friends? It happened because the aggressor wasn't condemned before. I remember during the last session here in this hemicycle, I was talking about another Azeri incursion into sovereign Armenian territory, which happened in 2021. And I was talking about the prisoners of war, Armenian prisoners of war, which are still kept in Azerbaijan. They were kept in Azerbaijan back then, they are still kept there. And now, a couple of months later, we have new aggression, new occupation, new prisoners of war, some of which were killed, and there is footage of this video of them being summarily executed by Azerbaijanis immediately after being captured. And this happens because they were not condemned before. Dear colleagues, Mr. Seidov, the chair of the Azerbaijani delegation, is going to speak after me. And most probably, he is going to resort to the good old Azerbaijani tradition of denial, saying that Azerbaijani aggression simply did not happen, but the Armenians deserved it. This is what he's going to do. He's going to tell Mr. Gowan, Madame Aberg, and the other speakers that they are wrong, that there is no incursion into Armenian territory. Why? Because it's his job. Mr. Seidov's job is to justify the actions, the illegal crimes of his authoritarian government here. Speaking about the necessity of talking about peace in this organization, I want to inform you that the president of PACE, Mr. Cox, invited me and Mr. Seidov to have a meeting in Paris when we had to have a monitoring committee meeting. This meeting had to be held on September 15th. Why it didn't happen? Simply because 2 days before this meeting, my country was attacked by Azerbaijan, and I didn't go to Paris. Dear friends, it's possible to talk about peace when your colleague wants to talk about peace. It's impossible to talk about peace while shooting at you, while occupying your territory. It's impossible. I understand that many of our friends have been reluctant to take sides when it comes to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. It's complicated, I understand. This is different. We have a case of an authoritarian country attacking its democratic neighbor and occupying its territory. This must be condemned, and the Azerbaijani troops have to withdraw from Armenian territory immediately, and the Armenian prisoners of war should be released. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubian. Then the next speaker on behalf of European Conservatives is Mr. Samar Seidov from Azerbaijan. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam President. And I think Mr. Rubian tried to mislead this organization. I think his job to present everything upside down. Unfortunately, he is speaking about the hostilities between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but he didn't mention that still Armenian military forces inside Azerbaijan, inside Azerbaijan. He didn't mention that before September hostilities between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Armenian military forces infiltrated into the territory of Azerbaijan and put the mines inside the territories, within the territory of Azerbaijan. Why Mr. Rubinian didn't mention about each day casualties of Azerbaijanis? Why he didn't mention about the infrastructure and civilians which had been killed and killing on daily basis because of Armenian invasion to Azerbaijani territories? My dear colleagues, my dear friends, you know, unfortunately, there is a war against Azerbaijan. Information war against Azerbaijan. With videos, with accusations, with attacks to our embassies, with this kind of presentations, that only one side is guilty. But that's not true. The truth that immediately after peaceful negotiations between the President of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister of Armenia, these clashes had happened. That immediately after the positive developments which we are trying to do, something very strange is coming from our neighboring country. We should understand that they are not in favor to fulfill the obligations under which they have signed. They have to withdraw the military forces from Azerbaijan. They have to sit together and to think about delimitation and demarcation of the territories. They have to bring those who committed crimes against Azerbaijanis in Ganja, in Khojaly, to the justice. Because we did it. Of course, during the war, something could happen, but the prosecutor general from Azerbaijan already started its mission in Azerbaijan. Have you heard about any initiative from Armenia? No. And that's why, if we are going to be balanced and objective, we should take into account that this assembly is becoming a tool in the hands of those who are thinking about war, not peace. We are, despite of all the things, for peace, and we will do our best for peace in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saido. The next speaker is Mr. Rafael Husseino from Azerbaijan and ALDE. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, dear colleagues. For almost 30 years, Azerbaijan has faced great hypocrisy and lies. It was international hypocrisy that lasted almost 30 years, thus having prevented Azerbaijan from cleaning its occupied lands from the invaders. Nonetheless, everything comes to the end sooner or later. In the fall of 2020, Azerbaijan had its final say in the war started by Armenia and liberated its occupied lands within 44 days without the intervention of any foreign forces. And forces that cannot come to terms with this reality resort to neo-hypocrisy. An attempt to revive an already resolved issue and end the war to put it back on the agenda is a new manifestation of hypocrisy. Dear colleagues, the role and importance of Azerbaijan in ensuring the energy security of Europe has recently increased dramatically. Intensive work is underway to reach a final peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Already, the presidents of France and European Council are more actively involved to this process with the mediation mission. The successful meeting between them and the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan last week in Prague is a clear confirmation of this. Well, why is the storm in a glass suddenly created when the processes go that way? Who cares about all this? Those who oppose Azerbaijan's contribution to Europe's energy security are not only working against Azerbaijan, and first of all, they are making mischief to Europe. Those who alleged care about Armenia and resort to such fictional ways are actually acting against Armenia and the Armenian people. Armenia, which carried out armed attacks on Azerbaijan with the aim of provocation and suffered a heavy defeat in the border regions that have not yet been delimited, is trying to convince those who are ignorant of this nature of events. Goal of the network, which is currently zealously acting against Azerbaijan, is to maximize the tension at the present time. I appeal to those who fell into the same net. Never let yourself become a pawn on the political chessboard doing the dirty work. Sooner or later, this rotten campaign that was started will also collapse very soon. The network of hypocrisy will be broken. Do not disturb the ongoing negotiation process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Do not prevent the great peace that is underway. Avoid actions that hinder the benefits which Azerbaijan will render to Europe's energy security. Don't let any temptations mislead you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hüsnü. And next speaker is Mr. Ahmed Yildiz from Turkey. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, I hope this discussion will contribute assist the normalization process between the two countries here. Indeed, it is unbelievable we discussed this issue here when the almost whole continent is in danger of threat of war and nuclear threat. We are in post-conflict era after the liberation of Azerbaijani territories from 3 decades occupation, which consists of 20% of its territory and almost 1 million IDPs. What we need here is, in the post-conflict era, a comprehensive peace treaty, as was proposed by Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, till now, we see Armenia is refraining from meaningful negotiations on this issue. And the basics of any peace treaty, of course, is recognition of the territorial integrity of each other, as in any other peace treaty. This is a must for a lasting peace. I encourage Armenian colleagues to come to the table based on these principles. From the beginning of this conflict, this is clear. This is the only lasting solution. We encourage dialogue between the two countries. We are happy that Azerbaijan and Armenian representatives meet in different fora. Also, we have a normalization process with Armenia. Our colleague Ruben is Armenian representative. We have a Turkish representatives there. They are in constant dialogue. Also in Prague, during the first summit of European Political Community, President Erdogan and Prime Minister Pashinyan met. So when Mr. Gavan and others say that the Turkish principle should be more balanced, Turkish attitude is very, very principled from the beginning, as in any other dispute between any two countries. It is a peace on the territorial integrity of nations, countries, as was stipulated in the UN, several UN decisions. From now on, I hope that both parties will be in better and direct dialogue, but I'm still concerned that I said in another meeting, Armenia should give maps of landmines. They decorated in the Azerbaijan land for 3 decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yildiz. Next speaker is Mr. Vladimir Vardanyan from Armenia, EPP. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, dear colleagues. I would like to express the words of gratitude to all the political groups supporting and actually reflecting the reality. I would like to address to Mr. Saidov on the issues he raised. Mr. Saidov, you are playing a very complicated role.
Yes,
you cannot even understand how far I understand you, how it is possible for many years to defend the evil. Okay, in any case, it's your choice, but here we are in the organizational values, and let's speak about values. It's very important when we are speaking about commitments. Mr. Saidov, our colleagues, when Armenia and Azerbaijan became the members of this respective organization, we have taken obligation not to use force or threat of force to solve political problems. It's happened in 2020 and nobody reacted. We knew that this day would come. Today, fortunately, many of you understand what's going on there. When Mr. Saidov is speaking about the Armenian forces in Azerbaijan, I would like to say that it's totally false. But the people of Nagorno-Karabakh has the right to defend their existential life. Look what's going on. Dismemberment, humiliation, willful killing. We have the right to self-defense at least. We are trying to use this right. When Mr. Said was speaking about provocations, I remember the Nazi time rhetorics. Polish troops organized provocation, that's why we invaded to Poland. When I listened to the words concerning the Agdam or the other regions, okay, let's come back to 1915. Let's speak about Armenian genocide. Let's speak about pogroms in Shushi. We are speaking about what's going now, here. And we have prisoners of war. We have missing persons. We have the cases of war crimes. We have cases that the European Court of Human Rights should react immediately. Dear colleagues, thank you for your support. Azerbaijani troops in Armenian territory should be withdrawn immediately. This is the requirement of UN Charter. This is a requirement of the order of the United Nations. Armenian prisoners of war should be released. This racist rhetoric should be stopped. This racist attitude of killing Armenians because we are just Armenians. And imagine the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. We are every day fighting for their lives to be not killed because of they are Armenians. It's not a territorial dispute. It's not a situation between the two countries. It's a situation of existence of a people, of human beings. The reason why this respective organization was created. And I would like to say to Mr. Saidov, remember, all the good things would come back and all the evil would come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vardanyan. Before I interrupt the list, I give the floor to the last speaker, Monsieur Bernard Fournier, EPP.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, colleagues. The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan is again a matter for our Assembly. The situation has again worsened over the last month, with several hundred deaths in the wake of the unleashing of hostilities for which both sides blame one another. I very much regret the situation in which Azerbaijan, it strikes me, is seeking to profit from the situation being brought about by the war in Ukraine in order to impose its views on Armenia and take back territory it lost in 1991. The war in Ukraine means that Russia is less involved in the region. Remember, it was Russia which was able to impose a ceasefire in 2020 after more than a month and a half of particularly deadly fighting. Today, negotiations are being held to achieve a final peace agreement under the aegis of the President of the European Council, Charles Michel. And whilst at the end of August he sounded optimistic, fighting which has taken place at the end of September has clearly undermined this optimism. It is by no means certain that the European Union on its own will be able to assist the two belligerents in achieving a peace agreement. And clearly, Azerbaijan is seeking to extend its territory beyond that provided for in the ceasefire agreement signed in November 2020, and this bellicose stance must be firmly condemned. Furthermore, we are bound to observe that the resolution adopted by our Assembly in September 2021 on the humanitarian cause of the conflict has only partially been implemented, and infringements of the rights of Armenian civilian populations have proliferated, along with abuses by the Azeri army on Armenian territory. The safety of Armenian nationals in Nagorno-Karabakh is still not guaranteed. Similarly, Armenia continues to fear for its prisoners of war who've been detained by the Azeri authorities and has called on the International Court of Justice to order Azerbaijan to protect people who have been arrested in the wake of the 2020 conflict. And in this regard, I would like the Anti-Torture Committee to go to both countries to look into the fate of prisoners, and not only Armenia, as is scheduled in the committee's programme of work. In actual fact, the committee last visited Azerbaijan back in 2019, in other words, before the 2020 conflict, and I think that that in itself justifies a fresh inspection. Ladies and gentlemen, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia must not divert us from what is happening in Nagorno-Karabakh. Thank you.
Fournier, I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that typewritten text must be submitted electronically, if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. I remind you that at the end of a current affairs debate, the Assembly is not asked to decide upon a text, but the matter may be referred by the Bureau to the responsible committee for a report. And also thanks to Mr. Gaven. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with the agenda which was approved this morning, and the sitting is adjourned.